It's 10:45. Take it away, Courtney and Sarah. And unmute yourselves.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming to our presentation, Undertaking a Liaison Needs Assessment Project to Better Serve Subjects, Students, and Faculty.
Okay, before we begin, we want to share a folder of resources with you that you can use during this presentation. So Sarah's going to put that link in the chat box. You can see it's also bit.ly/TUL needs, NEEDS. And in there you will find an outline to follow along with, and you can save your own copy if you'd like to make notes on it. You'll see a handout with questions, which we'll get to later in the presentation. There's also an activity that we'll go into at the end, and you'll have a copy of our slides as well. So everything should be in that folder. And we're going to introduce ourselves. Hello, thank you for having us. My name is Courtney Eger. I'm the Learning and Engagement Librarian at Temple University's Health Sciences Libraries.
And I'm Sarah Jones. I'm a Science and Engineering Librarian at Temple's main campus library.
And so we're going to start with our agenda for today. We're going to go over some definitions, then give you the background on what inspired our projects. We'll talk about our needs assessment goals and the projects, then go over the outcomes and our next steps. Finally, hopefully time will allow, we have a Google Doc brainstorming activity for the group.
Okay, so let's get started with the basics. Here are some ways that we defined needs assessments when we embarked on these projects. So our first definition that we found very helpful is, yes, from Wikipedia. So Wikipedia defines a need assessment as a systematic process for determining and addressing needs or gaps between current conditions and desired conditions or wants. The discrepancy between the current condition and the wanted condition must be measured to appropriately identify the need. The need can be a desire to improve current performance or to correct a deficiency. According to this article by Janice Silver that was published in the Journal of Hospital Librarianship, a good needs assessment can reveal many things about a library. One of those things is that the library does not belong to the librarian alone. Ownership of the library is shared with library users. When patrons are given the opportunity to describe their needs, the library gains information that is vital to its activities and future. When a needs assessment is structured carefully, it can become the real key to library growth and the justification for future decisions.
Okay, now that you know what a needs assessment is, why did we perform one? We both took on these projects out of a feeling of failure. We'll each take a turn to explain what we mean by this. So starting with me, when I decided to perform a needs assessment, I was brand new to my position. I'd been at Temple for only about 5 months. Now, when I went there, I was assigned to be the subject librarian or liaison to the occupational therapy, physical therapy, and recreational therapy programs, all of which are part of the College of Public Health. Liaisons at Temple are expected to teach research skills at instructor request, keep students and faculty informed of library updates, assist faculty in collection development, and work with students and faculty closely in research consultations. So first of all, the challenging part of being the liaison to this group is that I work at the library at the Health Sciences Center, whereas the College of Public Health is housed at the main campus, which is only a couple of miles down the road, but very much in another world. So there was physical distance between me and my programs. Many of the students are graduate students, although there are a couple of undergraduate degrees. The doctorate in OT program is all online, as is the master's degree in recreational therapy. So 2 programs completely online. That was another outreach challenge. There was already some trouble communicating with faculty. There was a lack of librarian-led instruction. Before I got there, in the past 2 years, or in the previous 2 years, there were only 3 instruction sessions given within those programs. So when I began at Temple, I did attempt to schedule meetings with the program directors. I successfully had a meeting with one of them, but then he left for another job, so that relationship was severed. I never met with the other two, even though I attempted different, methods of reaching out to them. Now, I also tried in-person office hours on their campus. So I would physically travel to their campus, sit in their main building at a table just randomly in a hallway, essentially taking up a seat that a student could use. And I waited around for questions. I did advertise it. I had a sign up on my table, but I think over 7 times of doing this, I had 4 questions. So it was really clear that all of my outreach methods were not working, and I had to be more strategic about connecting with these programs.
So I've been the science and engineering librarian since July of 2017. And a few months before I initiated this project, I took on liaison duties to a department that was new to me, the Computer and Information Science department. So when I became the liaison to that department, I initiated all of the same outreach strategies that I had had success with in my other departments that I work with. But these strategies did not lead to the same results in computer and information science at all. So I think in my first year as the liaison, I had only met with 3 faculty from that department, and I'd had a small handful of questions from students, but nothing too substantial. And I'd only taught 1 class in the program in that time. So similar to Courtney, it came out of this sort of sense of failure and this frustration for me that all of my outreach strategies, which had worked in the past, just were not the correct approach for this department. So as you'll see, Courtney and I took very different approaches to performing our needs assessments. So now we're going to share our goals and processes for doing so, specifically how we developed questions, how we performed background research, and how we communicated with faculty in our respective departments.
So to the first point of developing questions, that's literally where I started. I developed the longest list of questions and of every single item I could possibly want to know about my subjects and their programs. So what you see on the screen is just a sample of that list, and you can find the longer list of my questions and investigation areas in that Google folder. So I started with this long list. Here's everything I want to know about these programs and how I can be more integrated in them. But I knew I needed help. I knew that just having a list of questions was not enough. So I contacted our library staff member who is in charge of assessment. I asked her for feedback on my list, and I asked her what approach I should take. So she and I met, and she suggested that it would be better to focus on one program, like picking, say, occupational therapy and sticking with that, or on one group that I serve, because my list had stuff about faculty and it had stuff about students. So she said, pick one. She thought that a survey to faculty would not really yield the results that I wanted, so she suggested conducting interviews with program directors as the place to start. So we decided that I would email an invitation to the program directors asking to meet, and I would send questions ahead of time. She emphasized that I should really try to listen and not really be there to sell them on the library. So just listen to what they're saying instead of selling our services. So these were the next steps that we settled on. Identify courses that may have a research component, because obviously that seemed like a natural fit for a librarian to work with. Then to create specific questions or topics for discussion. After that's ready, set up meetings with the program directors, and then just prepare for each individual meeting. So I spent another month working on the draft of the introductory email, as well as the list of questions for those directors. I also got feedback from my direct supervisor. She helped me clear up language, and she helped me make it more about them, and again, less about the library. So these were the main discussion questions that I sent to the program directors. What are the barriers your students face in searching for and using research? What barriers do faculty face in teaching research skills? So in the meantime, I gathered more background information, like what degrees are offered in each program, what are the names of the faculty involved in teaching in those programs, what courses are currently offered by looking at the course directory. I also reviewed our SpringShare Lib Analytics records for information on library instruction and also research consultations. So after sending my email invitation to the 3 program directors, I heard from all of them within a reasonable amount of time. They were all open to meeting with me. Recreational therapy actually invited me to a faculty meeting. I met with the occupational therapy program director, just she and I. And then I also met with the physical therapy program director. And during our meeting, he ended up pulling in another faculty member. So we had a nice conversation and really connections were made. Just a word on the timeline of this project. I decided I wanted to undertake this around the summer or fall of 2019, and I made it a goal through our official performance tracking system at Temple. We have to set goals for the year, and that was one of my goals. I spent time that fall making the list of questions and gathering the information. I also met with the library assessment director during that time. Then I drafted my email to program directors probably right as the end of the year, the end of the calendar year approached. And so I timed it strategically. So I sent my meeting requests at the beginning of the spring 2020 semester in January, right as faculty were returning and really thinking about planning for the year. So I was able to have all of my meetings with the directors in person at the end of January and into February. And then, of course, we all know what happened in March 2020. So I'll tell you about the outcomes of these meetings after Sarah tells you about her process.
Thanks, Courtney. So I took a very different approach to my assessment, as you'll see, because my department is very different in nature. So Courtney has talked about how she created the longest list of questions ever. Well, I actually managed to add to her list of questions. She was kind enough to share it with me. I then added even more questions guided by my readings on needs assessments. When I met with Nancy Turner, our colleague who's in charge of assessment, to go over these questions, I had come up with almost 50 questions, but thankfully Nancy told me that I did not have to answer all of these questions and it would not make any sense to even try. So instead, I worked with her to develop a realistic approach based on what I already did know about the computer and information science department, which is basically that they're not very responsive. So I knew from my own attempts to reach out to CIS, as well as some conversations that I'd had informally with computer and information science liaison librarians at other institutions, that this is a department that would be unlikely to meet with me or to respond to something like a survey. So I had to devise some other ways of gathering information to best serve them. And this is where my assessment strategy really differs from Courtney's. It was less about working with CIS and communicating with this department directly. It was more about exploring other information sources around the computer and information science department that might provide me with helpful insight to their workings. So first, I brainstormed different places that I have access to that could provide me with some information on the CIS department. And I'll share some of the places that I looked. So I divided it into 3 different information source areas: within the library, within my university, and then external sources. So within the library, I looked at data that the librarians and library staff had collected about reference and research transactions. I talked to my colleague Jasmine Clark at our digital scholars studio, who keeps really detailed records of the kinds of inquiries and consultations that she gets. So that was really helpful for me in seeing how CIS researchers might be using different library services beyond the ones that I'm involved with. I looked at our collections. So what's being checked out in this area? Do we have any course reserves? Are we getting interlibrary loan requests from these classes? I checked out scholarly communications and data support. So one really great place that I found a lot of connections with the CIS department is that the library offers a textbook affordability award every year. And this is an area that, as I learned through this assessment, computer and information science is really on the forefront of. So our textbook affordability program winner was a CIS professor, and that became my first initial contact with the department, was in meeting with this professor about textbook affordability. And then I just did some digging on information that is provided by Temple University. So this was a lot of basic stuff like how many students and faculty are in this program, what programs exist within the Computer and Information Science department. I also looked really closely at our general education classes. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. A colleague I have that works with our general education program was kind enough to share the full syllabi of all of the classes that are taught in this program through CIS, which was really helpful for me. I looked at writing intensive courses offered in the department. I did some digging to find student organizations, interdisciplinary institutes where CIS has some faculty involvement. I even checked out research groups within the department on Twitter, which is a really great source of information about research. And I tried to just get a basic understanding of what the promotion and tenure process looks like for computer science. And then finally, external sources. So this is the stuff where librarians are really good at finding information. I simply looked at databases to understand the publishing landscape of this department. So where are Temple computer science faculty publishing? What topics are they publishing on? I did a little digging to find ORCID researcher IDs, figured out who the accrediting body was for the department. I tried to figure out some of their data needs. So figure out what kinds of data are these researchers producing? Are there any data requirements around sharing data that might be coming from important publishers or funders? And then generally, I just tried to read up on the field of computer science. I'm not a computer scientist. I want to have a basic understanding of important trends in the field. So with the goal of understanding what needs computer and information science has that the library can meet, I devised some more specific guiding questions. What kinds of research are happening at the undergrad, grad, and faculty level here at Temple? What are their data needs? And importantly, what are their data needs that they're not meeting in-house within the department or the college? And finally, are there areas of research and publishing in CIS where there are processes that are not currently being supported somewhere else?
All right, let's move on to outcomes. Specifically, what did we learn and what do we plan to do as a result? Sarah, if you want to go slide forward. Thank you. So I'm going to tell you first about what I learned and what I am still working to do, because there is still a lot of work in progress, especially again, after we all know, after COVID and work from home changed everybody's circumstances. So first, here's the qualitative data that I gathered about student research behavior. This is according to faculty from all three of my programs. Some of it probably will not come as a surprise to any of you. Other statements did come as a surprise to me. So I'm going to read you the list of the things they said. So students don't know how to find reliable research. Students aren't using scholarly journals. Students are finding website sources and not scholarly journals. Students are using the first result that pops up. Students struggle with finding and reading scholarly articles. They will cite the background or introduction, but not the original research of the article. Students struggle with synonyms or alternate keywords when searching the literature. Students struggle with writing, which they acknowledged is not the librarian's job to correct. It just naturally came in the conversation. Grad students, specifically the recreational therapy grad students, struggle with more advanced database searching. Instructors in all three of those departments are assuming that students remember how to research from semester to semester or year to year. The occupational therapy and the recreational therapy disciplines don't have as many subject-specific research journals, so students need to learn to use journals from other disciplines and learn to apply that knowledge into their field, which I observe lots of times in my classes with them. Students struggle with citation management software. They struggle with accurate APA citations. Physical therapy told me that research is a struggle because most of their curriculum is clinical based. They maybe only have one or two evidence-based practice classes that involve library research. Otherwise, it's all hands-on in classes and labs. And then finally, all departments said students struggle with connecting the literature and the research to their future lives as clinicians. So from this data, I created a list of goals for how I could address some of these issues that I learned about. So instruction seemed like an obvious place to start. We weren't teaching as much in these courses. They obviously need to learn some of the skills. So I decided to look at some specific classes, and the meetings I had with the faculty and program directors did help me identify some courses where I might be useful. So for instance, occupational therapy has a research 1 class, which I've started to become involved in regularly, but they also have a research 2 class. So it was a conversation where perhaps that's a great place for me to go to follow up with them, again, helping them pass their skills from semester to semester. So following up in research 2. I was also invited to present at the recreational therapy online orientation, but then that didn't happen. So it could have been COVID related, but I'm also learning that with that group specifically, that they're very welcoming and enthusiastic about me and my work, but they're not really good at follow-up. So I think I have to make a better effort to, check in with them more often instead of waiting for them to check in with me. For physical therapy, pre-COVID, there were PT department brown bag lunches, and they suggested bringing a library workshop or 2 to those lunches. But again, that did not come to fruition because of COVID. And then physical therapy, and I did have a discussion about the struggles with their clinical-based curriculum, but they did say, we have this evidence-based practice course for the first year physical therapy students, and maybe that would be a good fit for you. Also, all 3 departments suggested virtual office hours via Zoom because I told them that my in-person office hours were not working. And this was pre-COVID. They actually were suggesting this so that I didn't have to drive down to their campus. They were suggesting Zoom office hours. So during the shutdown, when everybody was home, I did hold online office hours in the fall semester. I held 6. And there was still 0 attendance. So, it could have been that the day and time didn't work, but I know I advertised it out to the faculty and the students. So again, it's now something I have to rethink going forward. So there was a suggestion, not by me, but it did come from the faculty. I think this was recreational therapy specifically, an idea to create short videos that cover the basics of how to do research because they have that online master's program. So they thought that might be good for those students. They actually gave me lists of topics because I said, what topics would you suggest I make videos on? So they said topics like popular versus scholarly, how to read a scholarly article and use it in your research, talking about citation managers and APA citation, more advanced things like finding the number of times an article has been cited, talking about keywords, synonyms, mesh terms, and expanding research into other disciplines. So I'm just kind of hesitant about that suggestion. I know how much time it takes to produce a really good video. And, there's already so many great videos out there produced by libraries already. I don't want to reinvent the wheel. So this has been something that, again, just due to COVID and work from home, I've just put that project on hold, but it's still in the back of my mind. And then all of the departments agreed that more exposure to me as their librarian for both students and faculty would increase engagement with the library at all levels. Hey, Sarah.
Okay, thanks. So my needs assessment, while the pandemic did hit midway through the process, it actually was not impacted all that much. Because as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't really working with the department, communicating with the department all that much. I was more doing research on them on my own. So I was able to proceed despite all of the upheaval and change in library services and support. So here are some areas that I identified as a result of the needs assessment that sounded like promising opportunities for library involvement. So first, Temple University has what we call our Gen Ed or General Education program. And these are basically distribution requirements. Undergrads have to take these general education courses in a variety of different areas, including a science and engineering component. In the science and engineering Gen Ed classes, The computer and information science ones are incredibly popular, and this makes a lot of sense, right? Students from all across the university, from all different disciplines, really want to learn computer and information science related concepts and skills. So as I mentioned earlier, my colleague was kind enough to share all of the syllabi from the Gen Ed programs with me to give me a pretty good understanding of what happens in those classes. And that's an area where I intend to do outreach to the department because I know that they have a really high volume of instruction happening in this area. I also learned that the writing intensive course in computer and information science in the undergrad program is seeking to improve the information literacy component, which is a requirement by the university. So this, of course, is a great place for librarians to get involved and help out. I communicated with instructors in the writing intensive program this year and pre-recorded a tutorial that was assigned to all students in the class as homework. I also learned about a fairly new computer and information science and physics dual undergrad program. This was an opportunity I was really excited to hear about because I have a great relationship with the physics department and their chair is a big fan of the library. We contact each other a lot and he's always promoting our resources and services. So I see that as a really good way to connect with computer science through their involvement with another department that I work quite closely with. I also learned about a data science program within the computer and information science department, which, while somewhat outside of my area of librarianship, is a great place to connect the computer and information science department with the research data services within the library. And finally, before COVID, I learned about one entirely online master's program within CIS, which was designed for people who are working full-time in a computer and information science related field. So this is a population that might benefit from virtual reference services, although of course, in light of the pandemic, pretty much everyone has benefited from virtual reference services. But pre-COVID, I was able to get involved with that program and record a virtual library tour that all of those students watch as part of their orientation. There are also two other certificate programs that are designed for people working in the field, which I believe are going back to being in person in the fall. So that's another area where I'm going to try to get involved. So in general, my plan was to use my findings to rework my outreach approach. And I've done this, it's been a constantly evolving process that of course has been evolving very differently due to the pandemic and now our planned return to campus. So my findings impacted everything from the beginning of the semester email that I send to all faculty in my departments. I changed the email that I was planning to send to CIS and added things that I had learned from my needs assessment were of particular interest in that field. I've also contacted individual CIS faculty members whose work I've learned about who I think may be interested in specific resources or services. And the pandemic, it actually provided some positive opportunities for engagement with the computer and information science department. First, unfortunately, at the beginning of the pandemic, we happened to have some issues with remote access to some of our resources. So I began hearing from instructors, staff, and students in CIS who had never contacted me in the past for basic help troubleshooting some tech issues. That was unfortunate, but it did open some lines of communication, some of which I've been able to continue now that they see me as a sort of go-to person for these issues. In addition, probably my biggest new source of communication with my department has been that due to the pandemic, there's been a university-wide focus on textbook affordability because so many of our students are having extra financial difficulties. So as a result of an email that was sent out to all faculty at the university, I was contacted by several CIS faculty and held consultations with them about adopting OER materials for their courses. And finally, while this is somewhat outside of the scope of my needs assessment project, I'm also considering as a future project analyzing publication data to see if this would provide any useful insights on research in the CIS department.
All right, so we're going to do a little activity here, some collective brainstorming. We won't put anyone on the spot. It's going to be through a Google Doc, which Sarah will share that link directly in just a second. Do you want to switch, Sarah? Let's switch our screen sharing. So we're going to switch. Bear with us, please. Let me find my slide. Perfect. All right, let me share my screen. So Sarah's going to put a direct link in just a second into our document. It's also available in the Google folder that we shared with you earlier in the presentation, which is also in the chat box. So what we're going to have you do, and I'm going to go over to the document, is we're going to have you pick a row. And I just frantically added a whole bunch of pages, so we should have plenty of rows. So, make sure you go down and pick a row where you do not see a cursor. We're going to ask that in the first column you type your name, in the second column that you type where you work. And what we're asking for in the third column is tell us about something that failed. It could be an outreach that failed. It could be a group that you haven't connected with. It doesn't have to be outreach or liaison specific, but whatever is really bugging you in your work, something that has failed and you're trying to correct. So you can see here, and please feel free to be typing as we're doing this. My example, you'll see I'm in the first line, and this is a real example. Pharmacy student coordinator, she will not forward my announcements about library events to the students. You can see Sarah put an example below me, and her failure right now is students are not coming to the drop-in librarian hours. So there's more to do with this activity. We're going to give you a couple of minutes to go ahead and find a place and fill it out. We'll be right back. Couple of minutes. I still see some typing, so we'll wait another minute or two. Okay, so just browsing through the document, I see a lot of, I think, common problems that many people are experiencing, just not getting responses to emails, students not using our resources. Some departments do contact you while others don't, right? That's part of the problem with, that's the reason why Sarah and I did these liaison needs assessment projects. So a lot of problems, a lot of similar problems. Now what we're going to try is some collective brainstorming to solve or suggest solutions to some of these problems. So in just a second, and bear with me, I just have to move stuff around on my screen. In just a second, Sarah and I will work to clear out all the black paint that we just put in. But what we're going to do is go to your row, and then you're going to go to the box, the row above you. So go one row above yours. We want you in the fourth column to pose a question or write down an idea for the person and their problem in the row above you. So for instance, if I was Sarah, above me is my example, Courtney's example. So Sarah would read my outreach that failed and give a suggestion. So the pharmacy student coordinator will not forward announcements. So maybe Sarah would say something like, could you find a contact above her or below her and ask them for help? Could you look for student group contacts? Maybe that's a suggestion that she has. Reach out to a student group, or look for a different contact. So go to the box above yours, and right now just work in the fourth row, or fourth column rather, and give a suggestion. If you're kind of stuck and can't think of anything, feel free to just tag on to someone else's box. But take a couple of minutes to help your colleagues, and just maybe looking at it from a different angle will help us all. You can then also feel free to go back to your original row and give a response to that person's idea. So this would be me, I found my row here, and maybe I would say, thanks, great idea. Or maybe I would have a question that I wanted to ask for follow-up. You can continue the conversation in that very last box. Oh, and this is my fault for not clearing up the black space. Hold on one second. It's not the easiest way to go. This is all my fault. I do apologize. We did not anticipate our document being as long, so we're so happy to see you all here. It's a good problem to have. Thanks, Sarah. I see you getting that last one. Perfect. And you can also feel free to clear anything out if we missed it. Google does not allow you to easily highlight like a whole column. Oh, and if you're the very last person on the list, you probably should have technically filled in my spot. If you want to go to the very top, you can address my problem. If you're at the very last spot, you can go all the way to the top and address me, Courtney Eger, at the very top. And that's no problem. I wasn't envisioning it either, Tina. So I'm just reading through all of the problems, the failures, and the responses. And I think there are some great conversations going on here. And like I said earlier, I feel we're not alone in the struggles to make connections with other departments and faculty and students. So absolutely, read through this document. I don't want to go line by line reading through it, but I thought maybe we could ask, and Sarah and I didn't discuss this. So I was just wondering if anyone had like a general strategy that has worked for them with outreach that they wanted to share with us. Has there been a great way you've been able to make contact with faculty or programs? Is there something they've really been responsive to? You can feel free to chat in the chat box, or if you want to unmute and share with us. But I am seeing some great ideas, like someone had posted, how about you just wander around the department? Just wander from office to office. I mean, they can't ignore you if you're just knocking on their door, right? So that's a great idea for a strategy that probably could be successful. So let us know in the chat box, or if you want to unmute and share a strategy that has worked for you. Did someone want to share?
Yes.
Go ahead.
This is a long struggle, and I'm a health sciences librarian at Hunter College, the City University of New York, and nursing, PT, and medical lab technology. Right. So I do have some success with the nursing and PT because I found the professors very receptive. Right. Then I'm given a new department, geology/geography, which is a long struggle, which what Sarah mentioned, they don't respond. And so I started meeting them before this whole drama started with the pandemic, in person, their graduation and event, and I introduced myself. No response, not much. Okay. Oh, great, great. Okay, what you do? Okay, okay, we'll talk. Then when I follow up with the email, no response, no response, no response. So, I mean, your presentation I like so much, I will try to do that same. So what I did was I became friendly with a para-professional in that department, and I start sharing, okay, I'm doing collection development. I got this much money. Will department interested in giving input? Okay. Then some of them responded, okay, these are the lists that I'm interested. Okay, so that I see opening there. So every year I do collection development. So what Sarah was saying, that, I mean, I didn't look at her idea, but that I see some opening in there, but I haven't gotten any with all this. They invite me for the graduation, their orientation, everything. But when for the request for consultation, for library classes request, nothing, nothing. So it's really is a struggle, and I'm also part of my college data services unit. So even there I help with data management, no response. So I see some opening with the collection development input, and hopefully like you did, if I get an appointment with them, that is a struggle. But if they give me 5-10 minutes, I could explain what I do and focusing on the some of the idea that you presented. And thank you so much. I found so helpful this. I was ready to drop my daughter, but I say, oh my God, I need to listen this. This is wonderful. And thank you making.
Thank you for your response. It is 11:30. This is Jennifer Smathers, your moderator. I'm sorry to have broken in, but I needed to give you your 15-minute warning, everybody.
That's fine.
Well, thank you for sharing your story. You know, I think you're doing everything right? You're going in person and making introductions. You're following up with them. You're dangling the money in front of them. I have money for materials for you. Give me, what do you want? So I think, you know, sometimes it's just being relentless and just appearing as many times as you can. And I think maybe you'll eventually make that one connection that makes a difference. So thank you for sharing. Let me read a couple of the chat box responses since we're getting close to the end of time. Logan said, +1 for wandering, dropping in and talking about not library things builds so many connections. So maybe it's just introducing yourself as a person and just talking to them about what they're up to, and kind of my strategy of not inserting the library. So that's a great piece of advice for making connections, Logan. Thank you. Tina said the most successful liaison experiences have been with faculty who are excited about developing the library collections, right? We're dangling the money in front of them. Regular emails have helped to encourage liaisons to spend their money, and that helps. Then Paulina said, and I love this, I never fret about what does not work. I go where I get traction and I let go of the rest. Sometimes nothing will work until the conditions are just right. And that's absolutely true. Sarah, do you want to mention what you said in the chat box?
Yeah, it seems like Jennifer and I kind of both shared this experience of visiting or just getting in touch with the administrative assistant or the office staff in your liaison departments. I have 5 different departments and 5 different ways that I send out my beginning of the semester email, because the culture and communication is so different in all of them. So the administrative staff can often tell you what the best way is to send out announcements, and they'll often actually manage the listservs where those sorts of things go out.
Thank you. That's we have so many communication problems at Temple. That's, I think, one of the barriers to effectively communicating with our faculty, but that's for another day. Beth started emailing a weekly newsletter with library-specific information, which I think is amazing. That's another great outreach strategy, and getting responses based on that email. That's great. We had a comment about working with a lot of adjuncts. That gets me into the department, right? I find adjuncts are so happy about the library and always want to talk about our sources. So that's a great group to go towards. And also started communicating with faculty via video rather than just an email. I think that's a great idea as well. Jennifer said, go to their after hours presentations and events. Definitely a way for them to get to know you. And become familiar with you. Student events where the faculty are also there. Logan said, don't send long emails. No one reads them. This is probably so true. Put the most important stuff at the top of the folds before they would have to keep scrolling. Absolutely. So check out Logan's piece of advice there. Having a lot of success with just a brief email. So perfect. These are awesome ideas. So I don't want to spend too much time going over this document, but I think it's wonderful. So I hope you take some time to read all of the different scenarios and see what strategies were suggested. Hopefully you'll get some ideas out of that. But Sarah, how about we finish up with the slides? Do you want me to just run the show?
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay.
And thank you everyone for your great ideas and for sharing your struggles. This is really helpful, I think, for everyone to see and to commiserate and generate ideas together. So if you do decide to undertake a liaison needs assessment program, based on our very different experiences, we've come up with some general advice for getting started and conceptualizing the process. So first, keep it focused. Don't necessarily expect to have all 50 of your questions that you've brainstormed answered. Choose either one program, one group of students or constituents, faculty, or even one particular class that you want to focus on. Make a list of questions or things you want to know about your subject area. And again, with that in mind, keep it focused, narrow it down if you need to. And decide on your approach. So how are you going to gather information? Are you going to interview faculty or students? Will you send out a survey or hold focus groups? Will you gather information from outside sources as well as within the department or your institution?
Okay, sorry, I'm on two computers now that I'm running the slideshow. Whatever your approach is, be prepared to listen, right? Try not to ask leading questions about the library. Be neutral and encouraging, which we just heard from you all, to don't even talk about the library, just listen. Also get creative. Brainstorm all of the different places that might hold information on your group. Ask stakeholders for recommendations on who to talk to next. Consider ways to integrate your findings into your future work, right? Take whatever you learn and think of how you can address it. All right, so we want to leave you with a concluding quotation. So what is this from? This is from a Library Leadership and Management Journal article. So understanding what users needs requires that you first understand what faculty and students do and how they work. What are they trying to accomplish? What barriers do they encounter and what would make their work lives easier? What are the gaps? What knowledge, expertise, and resources does the library offer that no one else on campus can or will provide? How can your library apply this unique portfolio to close these gaps? Exploring these questions involves deep campus engagement and the development of relationships that help faculty and students expand their traditional notions of a library and understand what is possible. And the answers to these questions should be central to every library mission and vision statement. So hopefully you've gotten a sense that Sarah and I are really trying to understand our faculty, students, and programs. We're really trying to make connections that in different ways that the library can help them. And we're just trying to make connections and relationships with all of these different groups. So we hope you're inspired to do the same. And then we're going to end the session. We have a few more minutes. We want to say thank you for having us. We absolutely want to answer any questions you might have. We do have that folder of resources. We can put that link in the chat one more time here in a second. I also saved the chat conversation so I can add all of those ideas into the folder. I'll make sure that it is somewhere either on that shared Google Doc or in a separate document. And you can absolutely email Sarah and I if you have any other questions. We have our contact information right there on the screen. So with that in mind, thank you. And let's check the chat and see if there's any questions.
I just wanted to answer a question in the chat. Someone asked for the list of questions. So I just reshared the folder. In addition to our presentation and outline, and the activity link, we also shared that initial list of questions. Again, way too big probably to cover in the scope of a single assessment, but if you want some ideas for the kinds of questions you can ask, those are in the folder too.
Hold on, I'm muted. It's document number 3. If you go into the folder, and then it's called list of questions. And it's a kind of a list of questions, more a list of just everything we wanted to know. So that whole list is there for you to review.
We've got another 6 minutes if anybody has questions. I know I'd like to thank Temple for showing up to a SUNYLA gig. My brother's actually a Fox School of Business graduate, so he has this great story about Indiana Jones moments and compact shelving.
We have a new library, but I'm familiar with the shelving you're referring to.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. And yeah, you have our email addresses, so feel free to get in touch with us.
If I could just hop on to let everyone know that there is the community hub where you can continue discussions after this session. Feel free to hop over there.
Is that a cow, Logan?
I can't tell you what this is.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's a horse.
It does look more horse-like now that I saw it closer.
It has a nice little Go Broncos shirt on.
Ah, very nice.
And since we're just
Well,
filling
it seems we
time,
finished up
I
just a
will,
little bit early.
yeah, I'll give a push for emailing faculty, especially new faculty, and just telling them that you work with their classes in the past. They don't know. They're overwhelmed with information. And if it's adjuncts, find out if there's a lead faculty member who develops the course and work through that person. Because when I work with our TESOL students, there's like 4 people that teach a capstone course. I email the one who develops the course and they know to respond to her emails. So working that way works well. But I made connections with her by literally dropping into her office and saying, "Hi, who are you? Tell me about your research," much like Jennifer Kegler did.
Yeah, Temple hosted like an online new faculty orientation session, and it was divided by program. And so I absolutely hopped into each breakout room and I was like, "I'm your librarian, let's talk." And that's another great way to make connections. Yes.